Mexico's transformed over the last 3 decades, mostly in good ways. It's moved from a closed authoritarian system to a vibrant, if at times messy, democracy. It's moved from a closed economy to one of the most open in the world and one that's increasingly competitive globally. It's also seen the rise of a middle class. And now we see a majority of Mexicans who have disposable income, and that in turn is fueling economic growth in the country through consumption. So many things are moving in the right direction, but we've also seen during this period a rise in violence, a real crisis on the security side. In the last 5 years, we've seen 50,000 people killed in drug and organized crime-related violence. Much of this is led by drug trafficking into the United States, but it's become so much more. We see growing extortion, we see kidnapping, we see contraband, we see human smuggling, and these prey upon the general population within Mexico.
There are many drivers to this crisis. One is government policy, but not only government policy. The increase in inter-cartel violence probably began in 2004, 2005, but it was at a relatively low level. December 2006 is when President Calderón decided to launch the first massive federal operation against drug trafficking organizations.
Sé que restablecer la seguridad no será fácil ni rápido, que tomará tiempo, que costará mucho dinero e incluso, y por desgracia, vidas humanas.
When the government offensive began in 2007, you had basically 4 or 5 criminal organizations. Over the past 5 years, you have had an atomization and a series of splits and schisms within the organizations. And what you have is no longer cartels, but gangs.
Mexico is a country that has been historically quite unequal. You see poverty in many areas. Mexico has been improving, but there still are millions that are left on the margin. And those are the types of populations that the drug cartels or gangs look to and often recruit from. There's a popular saying in Mexico that it's better to live 5 years as a king, as a rey, than 50 years as an ox, as a buey. And the idea here is that the opportunities for the long term, for particularly poorer youth, is so limited that it's better to go with the narcos now and be a narco king than just be a laborer who would live a long time. And so the challenge for the Mexican government is to turn that equation around.
It's also a crisis of Mexican security and justice institutions that have shown themselves quite unable to deal with this level of violence. You have very either weak, incompetent, or corrupt police forces at the state and particularly at the municipal level. You have a judicial system where prosecutors are driven to obtain confessions and not to investigate. Most of the prisons are disaster area. There's a significant weakness in every step of the way of the local justice and security system.
In Ciudad Juárez, people had undergone a pretty extensive period of directly or indirectly being impacted by violence. Businesses begin to close because of extortion. The city also lost a lot of jobs because of insecurity, and a lot of people migrated from the city. Education is really a problem, and so gangs become a very prominent phenomenon, especially in more marginalized neighborhoods.
The sense of fear and the sense of helplessness has extended beyond the areas that are mostly affected by the increase in violence. It has changed the national conversation in Mexico, and it has changed the way Mexicans think of their country.
There's one particular area that requires our urgent and coordinated action, and that is the battle that's taking place with respect to the drug cartels that are fueling kidnappings and sowing chaos in our communities and robbing so many of a future, both here in Mexico and in the United States.
While Mexico is unlikely to implode and become a truly failed state, the Mexican drug war has already spilled across its borders. In particular, it's weakened the institutions of all Central American countries, which now suffer from some of the world's highest rates of homicide.
The way forward is to continue dismantling criminal organizations, strengthening the institutional framework, and creating a social and economic base for the rule of law.
I can't not be optimistic about my country. But besides security and direct confrontation to criminal activity, there are a lot of things that a society in a situation of conflict needs to address. You need to have a hard hand, but you also need to have some soft policy solutions to the problem.
The international community has done very little to try to address Mexico's drug situation for two reasons. First, it really doesn't have the mandate or the capacity to do anything, particularly without the explicit invitation of the Mexican government. And the Mexicans are very attached to the principle of sovereignty. The second reason has to do with the United States, which has preferred to keep its relationship with Mexico in a bilateral framework rather than going for a more regional approach.
The United States can play a big role in helping Mexico with the problem of violence. They could deal with the guns that are going south and police the border much more strongly. They can help slow the money that feeds the violence that keeps these organizations going by stopping the money laundering that goes south to Mexico. And we can also have a real discussion about demand in the United States.
The drug war is not winnable in the sense that drug flows will not stop. But it is winnable in the sense that the country can regain normalcy. My greatest fear is that the current levels of violence will become entrenched. That we'll get used to having 30,000 homicides a year. That the sense of urgency that there is now will be lost.